ever feel like you're only kind of getting a surface level understanding of something?
Yeah.
Today, we are really going to go deep diving into, the life and teachings of Jesus, but through kind of unique lens, the chronological order of his sayings.
Right.
You brought some excerpts from the Complete Sayings of Jesus in Chronological Order, KJV dramatized audio. What's got you interested in, going through it this way?
I think it's like when you're putting a puzzle together,
Yeah.
you start to see how each piece, each saying in this case,
Right.
fits into the larger picture of his ministry. So instead of kind of jumping between gospels,
Yeah.
we're kind of tracing the evolution of his message within the timeline of his life.
Okay. I'm hooked already. So where do we begin with something as massive as the words of Jesus?
Well, I think a fitting place to start is with his baptism and then the temptation in the wilderness. Yeah. And I think what's important to remember is that these early events they're not just stories, right?
Yeah.
They're really foundational to understanding who Jesus was and what his mission was going to become.
Right. It's almost like setting the stage, right? It's like the beginning of a movie, we need that origin point.
Exactly.
And so with the baptism, there's that powerful moment, right, where you have this voice from heaven and it declares Jesus as God's son.
Yeah.
That's a pretty powerful affirmation of his identity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a public declaration of his divine nature, and it's really marking the beginning of his ministry.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating is that this spiritual high is immediately followed by intense testing in the wilderness.
Yeah, it's such a stark contrast.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I don't know, it reminds me of how sometimes, you experience a period of growth or clarity in your life. And often it feels like it's quickly followed by some kind of challenge.
Like the universe testing you, making sure you're serious.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And he's out there 40 days and 40 nights fasting. I mean, talk about commitment.
Yeah, that's not messing around. I think it speaks to the depth of his dedication. His message wasn't just some theoretical idea.
Right.
It was rooted in his personal experience, including, facing down temptation.
Yeah, and that makes his his call to discipleship so interesting to me, because it's this very simple, very straightforward command, follow me. And it's amazing to me how their lives are just completely transformed.
They dropped everything.
Yeah, they dropped their nets, they stopped, whatever they were doing, and followed him.
Yeah, what do you think it was about him? Was it what he was saying, or was there something about just his presence?
I think it's both. It's hard to put your finger on it, but to inspire that kind of immediate life change, it had to have been something really, magnetic.
It makes you think,
Yeah. And from there we see, him kind of stepping more into the public eye, right? And we get to the wedding at Cana.
Okay.
Where he, turns water into wine, which I'm not going to sit here and say that's the most important miracle, but but it certainly makes you kind of,
makes you think
about, what is the nature of this power?
It's a really good example, actually, of how his miracles weren't just about, spectacle or showing off, right? They were often very much embedded in everyday life.
Yeah.
And I think that reveals a lot about his compassion and his ability to kind of, meet people's needs in very unexpected ways.
And speaking of unexpected, then you have him driving the money changers out of the temple. And I mean, that's not exactly subtle.
No, not at all.
It feels to me very much like he is drawing a line in the sand.
Right. This is serious now. And, I think this really demonstrates that his compassion wasn't passive.
Yeah.
He was willing to confront injustice head on. He was willing to challenge the norms, the status quo.
Right.
Even if it meant kind of disrupting the accepted religious practices.
Yeah.
And this tension, right? This tension that we see here between him and the religious authorities, especially the Pharisees, it becomes a recurring theme throughout his ministry.
Oh, yeah. And that kind of brings us to a conversation that I think is really important to understanding his message, which is his encounter with Nicodemus about being born again.
Right.
And I think what's really interesting here is that he's not talking about a physical birth.
Right. It's not about going back into your mother's womb.
No. He's talking about something much, much deeper. He's talking about a spiritual transformation.
Yeah. It's about a fundamental shift in perspective, right? He's saying, it's not just about following the rules outwardly.
Right.
True faith requires an inward change of heart.
It's not about going through the motions.
Yes.
It's about a real, genuine internal change. And, that's a concept that has echoed throughout history, right? I mean, it's shaped how so many people view faith.
Yeah, it's really about getting to the core of what it means to believe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this emphasis on this inward transformation, it really lays the groundwork for one of the most well-known parts of his ministry, which is the Sermon on the Mount.
Which is, talk about a gold mine of ethical and spiritual guidance. But it's not just a list of rules.
No, not at all. It's more like
it's a different way to live.
It's a way of life, yeah.
Yeah.
It's challenging the societal norms, and it invites us to see the world through this different lens.
Right.
A lens of compassion and humility and justice. Think about the Beatitudes, right?
Yeah.
Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. I mean, these are not the things that the world typically values.
No, if anything, they're almost paradoxical. I mean, how can being poor in spirit be a good thing?
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it?
Right.
It's this radical reorientation of our values.
Yeah.
We have to shift our focus away from these material things, from social status towards things that are deeper.
Right.
Humility, compassion, this thirst for righteousness.
And it's not just about your own personal enlightenment or whatever. It really is a blueprint, it feels like, for how to build a more just and compassionate society.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't even end there. I mean, the Sermon on the Mount, it's chock full of these teachings that still resonate with us today. Not judging others, the importance of prayer, the golden rule, do unto others.
Right.
It's like a masterclass in how to live a more meaningful life.
Yeah. And I think what's really remarkable is how he weaves these profound teachings into everyday interactions, into stories. It's not just, standing on a mountain and preaching. It's about meeting people where they're at.
Right.
And using those moments as opportunities for teaching.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful ways he did that was through parables.
Yeah, the parables.
Parables.
They're like little story bombs, right?
They are.
They're these little stories that are just packed with so much meaning.
Yes.
And instead of just giving these straightforward answers, he uses these stories to get people thinking, to spark contemplation, and really he kind of invites the listener to find their own interpretations within them. I mean, take the parable of the sower, right? It's not really about farming. No. It's about how we receive the word of God.
Right. It's about, are we open to it? Are we closed off?
Yeah.
It's a brilliant, I think, analogy for the different ways that people approach faith.
Right.
And how those different approaches can really impact how we grow spiritually.
Right. So some people are like that rocky ground where the seed can't take root.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And then others are more like the fertile soil that's ready to receive and nurture that message.
Ready to grow.
And it's a good reminder that, our own openness and our own willingness to actually engage with his teachings plays a really big role in our own spiritual development.
For sure.
And then there's the parable of the mustard seed, which I've always found really hopeful.
Okay.
Because it's this tiny seed that grows into something massive and expansive.
It's this idea that, something small and seemingly insignificant can have this incredible power.
Right. And it speaks to that exponential power of faith.
Yes.
That even the smallest act of believing can have this ripple effect.
And not just in our own lives, but in the world around us too.
And we can't forget the parable of the prodigal son.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Which is always like a tearjerker.
Always. It gets you every time, doesn't it?
Every time. But it's such a powerful story about forgiveness and redemption and that unconditional love of a parent for their child.
Yeah, that image of the father.
Right.
Running out to embrace his son and just offering that forgiveness without any hesitation. Yeah. It's really, I think, it speaks to the very heart of grace.
Yeah, it's that reminder that, no matter how far we stray, there's always a path back to reconciliation, and not just with, our loved ones, but with the divine as well.
With God, ultimately. And it also challenges us, I think, to extend that same grace, that same forgiveness that we've received to other people.
Which is tough, It's hard to do sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's definitely a good thing to keep in mind, especially in a world that feels very quick to judge and not so quick to forgive. So your excerpts also include these accounts of Jesus performing miracles.
Right.
We've got, the healing of a leper, calming the storm, healing a paralyzed man.
Right.
These are often the stories that I think people jump to when they think about Jesus.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what do you think is the deeper meaning behind all of these events?
Yeah. Well, it's easy to get caught up in the spectacle of it all.
Right.
But I think what's really important to remember is that Jesus's miracles, they were never just about, displaying power. They were very much an expression of his compassion.
Okay.
He saw suffering.
Yeah.
And he responded with love and with healing.
Yeah.
And I think that really, demonstrates his authority over sickness, over nature, even over death.
Right. And it's interesting because it wasn't just about the physical healing either.
No, I mean there was often a kind of a spiritual restoration happening alongside the physical healing.
It was about making people whole.
Right.
In every sense of the word.
Right. And I mean that also again kind of speaks to his authority because he wasn't just like a healer in the sense of just taking care of a physical ailment. Right. It really was like he was demonstrating this power over forces that had people, captive in all these different areas of their lives.
Exactly. And it's almost like he's disrupting this natural order of the world to kind of reveal this higher order.
Right.
This glimpse of the kingdom of God kind of breaking in.
Yeah. And it's so interesting how these displays of power would often lead to these confrontations with these six-school Pharisees.
Well, and it's important to remember, who the Pharisees were, right? I mean, they represented the religious establishment of that time.
Right.
And they were very invested in upholding the law and their interpretations of it. Right. So they're not just exactly. Just random people who are like, I'm skeptical of this guy.
Right. They carry weight and his actions, his teachings, they challenge that.
So it's almost this clash of worldviews that we're seeing play out, this tension between, tradition and then, this new thing, this radical thing that Jesus is bringing.
And it makes you think about how hard it is, even for us today, to be confronted with something that challenges our deeply held beliefs,
Yeah, it's easy to kind of, just stick with what you know.
Right, to stay comfortable.
Right, and Jesus is not letting anybody stay comfortable.
No, not at all. He's right there in their faces, and you know what? He's not even backing down from those challenges.
Right.
He's addressing them head on.
Yeah.
He's using their own scriptures often to reveal, I think, deeper truths and to expose hypocrisy.
Right.
And to call for this more authentic faith.
Yeah, it's like he's saying you say you know these scriptures, but do you understand the heart of what they're saying?
Right, you're missing the point. And that kind of brings us, I think, to Passion Week.
Yeah.
Which is, such a pivotal moment in Jesus' journey, and of course it culminates in his crucifixion and resurrection. But it begins with his triumphal entry into Jerusalem.
Right, which is an event that's full of symbolism, right?
And it's interesting because, I mean, knowing what's to come, right? He chooses to ride into the city on a donkey, which is this symbol of humility and peace.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of what you would expect from,
a conquering king.
A conquering king, right?
And it's really, I think, such a powerful image because it speaks volumes about who he was, what his mission was.
Yeah.
And really, I think his understanding of true leadership, because he wasn't there to overthrow any empires, with violence, with force. He was there to bring about a different kind of kingdom.
Right. One that was founded on love and service and sacrifice.
And from there, it's like this chain of events starts to unfold, and we see him cleanse the temple
again
a second time. Yeah, like
round 2.
He's not messing around.
Not at all.
He's even more forceful this time, right? He's overturning tables. He's driving out the money changers. I mean, the tension at this point is palpable.
It's really at a boiling point. And you get the sense that the chief priests, the Pharisees, they realize they've lost control of the situation.
Yeah.
They can't control him. They can't silence his message. And I think it all really boils down to fear, right? They're afraid of his growing influence. They're afraid of the potential for upheaval that he represents. And that fear, combined with their own desire to hold on to power,
right,
it leads them to conspire against them.
Yeah. And it's kind of a sobering reminder that when you are standing up for what's right, when you are, pursuing truth and justice, sometimes it comes at a cost.
Yeah, there's a price to pay.
And for him, that cost was really unimaginable.
Yeah, his arrest and trial and then the crucifixion.
Right.
I mean, those are really difficult things to wrap your mind around even now. And, the source material that you brought, it doesn't It doesn't shy away from the brutality of what he endured.
No, it's a tough thing to read, to think about, but it's through this suffering, right? That he kind of, I mean, at least according to Christian theology,
right?
This is how he atones for the sins of humanity, right? This is how that bridge is built.
Right. It's this idea of this bridge between humanity and the divine being rebuilt.
And it's interesting because that's a concept that's been, obviously debated and interpreted in so many different ways for centuries, right?
Right.
But I think regardless of how you view that theologically, regardless of what you believe, the crucifixion still stands as this powerful testament to love and to sacrifice.
It's about as powerful an example as you can get.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, you get to the resurrection, which is, of course, the cornerstone of the Christian faith. And it's in that moment that this love and this sacrifice, I feel like, find their ultimate expression.
Yeah. And, the resurrection, it's not just about this miraculous event, right? It's about the hope of new life. It's about this triumph over death. And this promise of a reality that is completely transformed by God.
Yeah, it's like everything that he taught, that he embodied, kind of culminates in that moment, right? His message of love, forgiveness, the possibility of this radical transformation.
Yeah,
it all hinges on the resurrection.
It's the hinge upon which everything turns.
Right, exactly. And it's it's also amazing to think about the impact that this had.
Oh yeah.
Because it wasn't just okay, well, he died, he rose again, and then that was it. I mean, this empowered his followers.
Yeah, they had a message.
Something to share.
To go out and spread this message, and they did. And I mean, they faced persecution and all sorts of hardship, but they kept going.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me to think about the ripple effect that it's had from this very small group of people
to this global faith that has, I mean, it's shaped art and music and literature and culture and countless individual lives.
It's hard to even imagine.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes, diving into something like this, these chronological sayings so fascinating, because you're not just reading these old texts, right? You're tracing the evolution of these ideas that have really just resonated with humanity for centuries. They offer these insights into, the human condition and our search for meaning and for purpose and for connection with something bigger than ourselves.
We're all looking for those things.
Yeah, and it's almost like we get to, eavesdrop on this conversation that began centuries ago about these things, about love and forgiveness and justice and the possibility of a transformed life, of a transformed world.
And it's a conversation that's still going on. That's the amazing part.
It's still relevant today. Yeah, and I think, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I I'm kind of left with this feeling of, I don't know, just awe at the enduring power of this message, because it's a message that I think even today, centuries later, continues to challenge us, continues to inspire us, continues to offer this sense of hope.
It does.
In a world that often feels very, very hopeless. And I think, maybe by trying to understand the context of these teachings, the progression of these teachings, that maybe we can, gain a deeper appreciation for the nuances of what he was saying and find, new meaning, new relevance for our own lives today.
Yeah, it's a journey, isn't it?
It is a journey.